Every empire in history had its weapon. Rome had its legions, Britain had its navy. But America had the dollar, powered not by gold or guns, but by oil. This is the untold story of how black gold built a paper empire, the petrodollar, and how it quietly ruled the world for 50 years. In the early 20th century, money meant gold. Every dollar was backed by real metal stored in vaults. The world trusted the United States because its currency was as good as gold. But wars have a price. By the 1960s, America was spending billions on Vietnam, Europe, and global influence. Gold reserves began to drain, and trust began to fade. In August 1971, President Richard Nixon stunned the world. He announced that the US dollar would no longer be convertible into gold. In one stroke, he ended the Bretton Woods system and unleashed a new era of floating currencies. But without gold, the dollar was just paper. America needed a new foundation of trust. Fast. Then came 1973. OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, declared an oil embargo. Prices quadrupled overnight. For the first time, the West realized its lifeblood, energy, was controlled by a few nations in the desert. Lines of cars stretched for miles. Panic spread. The age of cheap oil was over. In the shadows of this crisis, US officials made their move. In 1974, American diplomats flew to Riyadh with one mission: convince Saudi Arabia to price its oil exclusively in US dollars. What they offered in return was irresistible: protection, weapons, and global legitimacy. That handshake created a new world order. Saudi Arabia agreed to sell oil only in dollars, and soon every OPEC nation followed. From Tokyo to Paris, every country now needed dollars to buy oil. The dollar wasn't just currency anymore. It became the blood of the world economy. Through oil, America built an empire with no colonies and no armies. The petrodollar system allowed Washington to print money, buy real goods, and control the flow of energy, all without firing a shot. Power moved silently, through oil contracts and financial markets. The system worked perfectly. Saudi Arabia and other oil-rich states deposited their dollar profits into US banks and government bonds, fueling American growth. This loop became known as petrodollar recycling, a system so efficient it turned US debt into global demand. By the 1980s, the world had no choice. If you wanted oil, you needed dollars. If you wanted dollars, you needed America. This silent rule gave the US unmatched influence over the global economy. Some nations tried to escape the petrodollar's grasp and paid a heavy price. In 2000, Iraq began selling oil in euros. 3 years later, Baghdad fell. Historians still debate whether it was coincidence or consequence. Iran too rejected the dollar, creating its own oil exchange priced in other currencies. The result? Sanctions, isolation, and economic strangulation. Defying the petrodollar was like challenging gravity. No nation could escape its pull. Then came Russia and China. Two giants determined to build a world beyond the dollar. They signed trade deals in rubles and yuan, built energy pipelines across Eurasia, and launched digital currencies. A quiet financial war had begun. In 2018, China introduced the petro-yuan, oil contracts priced in its own currency. For the first time in decades, nations had an alternative to the dollar. The global order began to tremble ever so slightly. Yet the US still held the ultimate weapon: trust. Despite its debt and divisions, the world still believes in the stability of the dollar. Because when crises strike, investors don't run from the dollar, they run to it. Today, the battle for currency control has moved into cyberspace. Cryptocurrencies, digital central bank money, and blockchain-based trade systems threaten to rewrite the rules once again. But one question remains: what happens when oil itself loses its power? As the world turns to renewables, solar, wind, and green tech, oil's dominance begins to fade, and with it, the petrodollar's throne grows weaker. The empire built on oil may soon face its final sunset. For half a century, the petrodollar quietly defined the modern age, shaping wars, alliances, and fortunes. It showed that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it flows, like oil, silently beneath our feet. Empires fall, economies shift. But the idea behind the petrodollar will live on. The idea that control of money is control of the world. And in that truth lies the greatest secret of modern history. Today, nations aren't fighting for land. They're fighting for currency. The petrodollar may one day fall, But the war for control of money, that will never end. This was the story of the petrodollar, the quiet empire of oil and paper. Its legacy is still alive, in every gallon pumped, every barrel sold, and every dollar spent. Because power, in the end, isn't just about who has the oil. It's about who controls the money that buys it.